And that's when we started talking in earnest about what was it going to look like long-term for North Bay Children's Center. Part of, we actually began our capital plans, as many of you know, in 2015, where our buildings began to deteriorate, and it was time to make a plan to replace these facilities. Relocating from this property was always part of our plan, and our need to accelerate that relocation of the property happened this year when the deterioration of our buildings outpaced our fundraising efforts. And so our board of directors, after a after many wet, rainy seasons, evaluated the buildings after a huge storm in January and determined that rather than repairing facilities that we were planning on replacing within a couple of years, now that we have started our plans for construction and design, that it was time to accelerate this and relocate these children, and we had to do it rapidly. We are working with licensing. We have closed 2 of the classrooms that were impacted by the storms, and the game plan was to move these children as quickly as possible, and hopefully by the time that the rain started again this year. And I have to really thank Jim and Yancey and our partners, the Nevada Unified School District, for really jumping in right away and helping us come up with a workable solution for temporary use of property across the driveway from us. And you're familiar with the property. We'll get into those details in a minute. And the idea was, again, to try to, we have been talking since March, well, before March, but the first MOU that we put together for consideration was done in March, and we've been going back and forth now with NUSD since then on trying to land on an agreement so that we could quickly move these kids again before rain starts and it delays the project. And if we don't do something soon, we're going to have to come up with a different plan. And what that different plan would look like is having to eliminate slots. And there are so many families that depend on the work that we do and the childcare that we provide. And what we would have to go back and do is look at our part-day programs and start there and be able and have to reduce services for families so that we could make sure that those infant, toddler, and preschool slots that we are keeping those in the community. So we need your help, and we need to land on a decision quickly, because we are still, once we have an MOU, we have our, Ralph will get into details, but we have the temporary permit for that site, and we are ready to pull the trigger and order the portables and get those kids into facilities that will better serve them as soon as possible. So with that, I want to introduce Ralph O'Rear, who's been a longtime supporter of the North Bay Children's Center and has joined our team. He joined our team in January. He is our capital projects and facilities consultant, and we don't know what we would do without Ralph's expertise. And anyway, and Ralph, you know, he gave North Bay Children's Center a 3-year plan. So we've got to do everything that we need to do right now in a 3-year window while we have this amazing man working on our behalf. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Ralph to get into the details of what this project looks like.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for making the time to talk about this tonight. There's kind of an outline here that runs down some of the different points that's in this piece of paper that I think Yancey distributed. Susan gave the background for things that are going on, and in terms of what's been happening for the development, or actually redevelopment of the site. In the MOU, it teased out a few things that have kept us from completing the MOU until we've had a chance to discuss things at a deeper level. And so I have a few pictures that are kind of coordinated to go along with these words. And the first one we have up here is the assessor's parcel site map. And this is sort of to get oriented. We can get into this just on a very surface level because it gets pretty deep pretty fast. Let's see if this has. So here, where this tiny arrow is going, that that is the NBCC parcel. And everything around it, with the exception of this parcel, is owned by the NUSD. What we're asking for to replace, what we're asking for in a temporary facility is what's cross-hatched in red. So the two elements here is, here's the assessor's parcel and the defined parcels that are associated with each of our ownership statuses. And then the crosshatch red is the temporary site. Susan mentioned that the buildings are badly deteriorating. I have, if you would like to see them, a lot of photographs of a badly deteriorated building. If you believe they're bad, then I think we can skip that part and move on to the next piece, which is, let's see, we got to get out of this one. I got my clicker. So go out of this one, and we need to go to number 3. So this is a shot of the plan that's been into the city of Novato for review and approval. The design review committee has gone through this and recommended acceptance of the design. So we're pretty far along in terms of honing in on what the future of the site would look like, and this is a picture of that. So it has the parcel, essentially the parcel is the boundaries of the area that's shown for improvement. And then the crosshatch lines at the bottom are towards the plan south. That's the parking lot area. To the left, you see the charter school, and the library doesn't show up on here, but it's there to the right. And the area that is of interest for the temporary site is this here. And this actually comes from a document that's a couple years old. It's actually 3 years old. That shows what the district had placed there some years ago. So those were portable buildings that had been there in the past. And what we're proposing to do is to utilize the same area in the same way with a different layout. Let's see, now let's go to number 4 is the same thing, more detail. I think we can skip that. Let's go to number 5. This is an aerial shot of the vicinity as it is. You can see 932 C Street is marked out and the parcel is marked in blue. The temporary site that we want to have governed by the MOU is shown in red, and you can see the vicinity in the context. The library is up in front. You can't see the charter school on this shot, but it's down below Plan South, and then you can see the parking lots and those sorts of things. So if we were to stay the course that we're on now, that 932 C Street site would be scraped and replaced with the facility that you saw the overhead shot in the one before. But what we're talking about now is trying to determine if our project goes forward as planned or if there is some opportunity for the district and the NBCC to find a way that keeps the NBCC's position and its opportunity for redevelopment intact, albeit at a different site. So if we're at a point where we are in no worse position, then we're willing to consider a relocation of this to another site in the NUSD properties. Then with that in mind, I think we don't really need to go to the rest of them. With that in mind, we can go to the second page of the handout that you got today and say that I personally have known about the so-called, we'll call it the donut hole. I've known about the so-called donut hole since about 2010 when I had a prior volunteer participation in an advisory group for the NBCC. At the time I was working at the Buck Institute, and we built a new building and it kind of went away and the funding didn't really materialize at the time. Now everything is very solid. There's a solid plan, there's solid funding, there's the opportunity to do so. The need is still there. Everything's in line for the NBCC to accomplish its overarching goal, which is to have a hub where the teachers can be trained, where the Garden of Eden program can be continued, it can become a community service. We're ready to do it. And that's where the temporary site comes in, because in order to do so with the existing plan, we have to relocate out of the bad buildings the children that are working in there and ultimately have to actually have a staged program so that we can get everyone off the site scrape it, prep it, and then start migrating back onto the site as the construction project gets phased in. So when we took a look even back then, we said, gee, this is a good concept, it's a good theory. Never really explored it in any kind of depth. Never really got to any point where the school district was able to make an offer. You know, we didn't really solicit one, you didn't really make one. There was just a discussion in general about the possibility. Well, now we're ready to go, and the possibility has a limited window to be explored. And on the second page, the bullet points that are at the bottom there are the items that we actually kind of have a shared interest in. It deals with a lot of the constraints that would come into play were we to move, and actually it identifies some constraints that the district has in terms of trying to use, reuse, optimize its own property. So the first thing that we need to know is that you can split the lots and create a separate zone, a separate parcel, and all the things that are associated with that. Get a deed recorded to show that the alternate parcel is real and transferable. You need to show that any proof of ownership is done through recorded transfer of title. That automatically means that the federal government gets involved because they still have a jurisdiction and authority over how the property is used and reused, disposed, transferred, or hypothecated. We need to know that any alternate location is free of any environmental risk or hazard. So there'll need to be explorations, core samples, ALTAs, phase 1, phase 2, all the things that come up when you're trying to create a parcel that can be identified as a separate and discrete parcel with its own APM. Any approvals for the lot line adjustments, federal authorities and jurisdiction over the Hamilton Base Conversion Project would be on your side because that's what it would take for you to define a new parcel for us. We have a reciprocal parking arrangement. So to the right of the 932 C Street tag on there are 55 spaces in the reciprocal agreement that the Children's Center has deeded access and title to use. Were we to move, we would have to consider that as part of the new parcel size to assure that we would still have the parking we need to carry through with this plan. Because quite frankly, our intention would be to work together to try and find a place where we could very simply, pick it up, move it around so that we don't have to redo the architectural, all the planning that's gone into it, spend that money again for reasons that wouldn't really be to the Children's Center advantage. When all this happens, your zoning is PD, planned development with a community facility kicker. Our zoning is special district, so the zonings are not the same. So we would have to make sure that the zoning variance, application, and those sorts of things would come through to make a parcel available to us with that taken care of. That means public meetings. That means lots more paperwork, lots of submittals to get the parcel defined. And each one of these bullet points is simply put down on paper, but there's probably another whole page of activities that are associated with each one of them and the associated costs for each of those elements. And that's where the last bullet point becomes really important to us. We are out of time. We think that in order to do what we can to work together to create the best situation for both of us, we can create a window of opportunity where the district can decide if it wants to take on the tasks to create a separate parcel, the costs and expenses to do that, and we're not really going to completely stop what we're doing, but we would hold the actual scrape and construction in abeyance for a period of time, and here we're suggesting that it be essentially 6 months from the approval of the occupancy of the temporary site should the MOU be approved. 6 months after that, which would take us basically out to June 30th. Now, I have to give this caveat that this is something we're putting out in a time frame that hasn't been vetted by our board. They know generally what it is that we're trying to accomplish here, but they haven't had the opportunity to say, June 30, 2019, we accept it, we don't accept it. We're confident that some window of opportunity is here, and we don't really have a lot of time to think about it, but we need to be in a position, a no or a no-go or go position within this very short window of time. And I think at the absolute outside, June 30, 2019 is it. So that's the place, that's kind of the background of what brought us to where we are today. And again, thanks for making the time to do this. It's an incredibly important decision for us. And if it's something that you feel will optimize your site, we're willing to take a look at it, cooperate and see if we can get it done. So I guess the kicker here is that we're more interested in creating a place, realizing the vision that Susan's had for 30 years and creating a site that can sustain the organization for the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And we have an opportunity now that we may not have in 6 months because our fundraising activities are on. We have a lot of people that are really supporters here. They see what's going on and they want to make it happen. So with that, I think Susan has a couple more comments, and thanks for your time.
I just wanted to bring you up to date on our fundraising activities. So this is a $7.5 million project, of which we have raised $2.7 million, and we have also secured the commercial real estate takeout loan. We have been pre-approved for $1 million. So we're more than halfway where we need to go right now. We have the funds to, again, relocate. And we have funds to, if the worst case scenario is, we come back in we are looking at either, obviously we want this full plan we've developed, but we can do it in stages. We have the funding to bring us back in stages. I know there was concern about once we move over, will we have the funding to move back? And we do. So we want to make sure, we want to have all the funding so we could build this building the facility that we have presented all at one time, but if we have to do it in stages, we will.
Can we, you might want to stay up there. We have some questions. Tom, you said you had a question?
I do. I have a couple questions. Thank you very much for coming, both of you, too. Just to start off, what is your construction cost estimate for the Dream Plan?
The Dream Plan.
The one that you just presented to us, yes. Okay.
We have escalation costs.
Well, yeah, we're all experiencing that, right?
Yeah, so $7.5 million was the
You, can you speak into the mic?
Yeah,
That way
we
there, our folks that are at home can hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, $7.5 million was the target cost, which included the temporary site.
Okay.
We are very fortunate to have on the board 2 engineers and real estate professionals, and this isn't my first rodeo on this either, so
Indeed.
we're able to be comfortable that the $7.5 million is still a good number even now with escalation and the
And you feel
temporary site.
comfortable you're going to be able to attain that goal by the June 30th, 2019, or at least you're going to need to start making payments if you're going to start construction then?
We would start, were there no issues with the MOU or an attempt for us to optimize each of our positions, we would start construction the day, the last child that moves over to the temporary site, we would demolish the bad buildings the next day.
You'd be starting right away,
We'd
okay.
be going right away.
And then what is the estimated construction time for the Dream Plan?
278 days.
So
Give or take.
less than a year.
And a couple of holidays, you got a year's probably.
Yeah.
Right. And my question to our staff, maybe to Yancey, would be, because, clearly there's a need, and I understand that, and it's urgent, and I get that. But I'm also I'd like to see if we have the opportunity to kind of move the balls and make everything happen simultaneously. So do you have any idea, we've talked about sampling, soil sampling, environmental, all these studies are going to have to get done. They take time. What other costs do you foresee, like, if for example, we maybe give them a parcel that's adjacent to this one, let's say, and we'll have to incur some costs developing utilities, sewer, that would be on us, would it not?
Yeah, so I think it depends on where, you potentially move them. And I think that's key. And would be two kind of ways to look at it of, what value does it bring in terms of our use of the property? And then, obviously compared to what additional costs. And so those really are very specific to the individual different options that would go
We're
down.
talking probably millions of dollars. Let's say it's just adjacent to this, very close to this area.
I cannot give you
Probably.
an accurate estimate of what those would cost. And so
Be
I
something
would,
That's important to me.
that it would be
at that-
important
when the time comes.
when the time comes, especially to, when we look at potentially making an offer to move, to do a potential property swap, we would need to do the significant analysis of what those costs would be, because we obviously wouldn't want to do anything where we would be putting in more cost than we would be gaining in value to the use, to the district's use of that property. So that would be the first step, would be engaging in that work of looking at the uses and what potential costs that we would have. Ralph noted several costs that would be there regardless of, and that's some of the costs of working for the federal government, the local government, changing, potentially changing deeds, so you got legal costs, but those would be for any. And then you have obviously specific costs depending on where you would potentially look to do a property swap.
Right. One more question. What is the timeline? Do you think that all of those things we just talked about, all those studies and all those, our due diligence essentially, would we be able to get those completed by the date that's been mentioned by Ralph of June 30th, 2019? Because that seems.
So we would have to start immediately in order to do that, to come back
We
with.
could do that. It's possible.
It's possible, but we'd have to commit the time and the resources to do that.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Trustee Milrick, and then Trustee Aguila.
Frame my thinking on this. Both institutions have served the children and the families of Nevada for decades, and we have partnered in that goal. And I'm looking forward to finding a way where we can both continue to do the good service that we do for the community. And so the notion that Ralph has put forward on how do we find a win-win situation is exactly what I hope comes out of this conversation. And I think we owe it to each other to look, because this could be beneficial to us or you or both or the community at large. So I think this is an important exercise. There are a couple of things that I wonder about in terms of timeline, and maybe Ralph can answer them. So there's a couple of milestones that I wonder. If the space is granted for temporary housing, you would construct it as quickly as possible, and I assume it's portables that come in mostly on trucks?
They do.
Yeah, okay, so, and then how many children would move to the temporary portables?
It's approximately 95, 98, 95, 98.
Okay. So
mean,
does
just to
that
be-
completely empty the student population on the current site? Or I'm trying to figure out, I thought you were knocking down the buildings at one end and keeping the buildings at the southern end where that little red dot is. So yeah, sure.
The buildings, the classrooms that are impacted are the two classrooms on the end here.
Here,
And
You speak into the mic,
the mic.
somehow. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
you-
how you're going to, maybe Yancy can help.
Yancy, can you turn it this way
You can, Vanna.
so that we can all see? Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, watch it,
Okay, there you go. All right. Thank you.
so the classrooms that we are currently not using are the two classrooms on the end of these facilities here. This is our infant toddler wing. This is our preschool and toddler wing. This is our administrative building. What we would move immediately are these two wings because the buildings are deteriorating. So these classrooms are right behind what happened to these classrooms on the end here. And so we will demolish these two wings immediately. We will continue to operate our administration here. And then so then when we're ready, this is part of, this is our half-day
So-
preschool.
So stop right there. So those two buildings are gone. The kids move over to
The
the
kids
other
move
building.
over here.
Those two buildings get flattened.
These
Gone.
buildings become flattened.
Yeah, and
These buildings, there was, and you've seen, I believe you've seen the plans, the temporary plans for
close
the.
enough. I'm just trying to get the big
Okay,
picture.
no, I get it. So then over this building over here, we will continue to operate there. This is a half-day school-age program, a half-day preschool, and a full-day preschool program. The full-day preschool kids will then move over here as soon as we're ready to demolish this building.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, is when does that
Yes,
second
and
building
that,
get
that
demolished?
is, depends on when we're ready to, we have plans for that classroom over in here.
Well, but do the kids move back into the two you demolished, or do you end
No,
up with all three of
no.
your buildings flattened except for the admin building?
Half of these kids are going to go up to our Tinker Way facility where we have our school-age program, the half-day preschool, and the school-age children will be absorbed into, we will absorb those kids into the Tinker Way program. And then we will find another location for administration, which is, and there will be a building, a facility over at this site, which is necessary for licensing to have a site supervisor there, but that is not, the administrative services that are over in this
Your
building.
business office would move
So
to
our
one
business
of your other
office, we
sites
will
or
move, we
someplace.
might just join you here in this building, or that's a
We
whole
could rent
nother
you space.
discussion. But no, we don't have a solution for that yet. Our biggest concern right now is these two, are the operations in these two wings, and moving them over here as quickly as we can.
So one more point on the timeline. When do you start investing dollars back in the site? Because the real commitment to not move this site happens when you say, okay, we're breaking ground and adding one of the new buildings on your master plan onto this site. That's when the reversing course costs money. Up until then, having the kids in this other room doesn't cost any money. But once you start construction on this site to your master plan, then there's, we're pouring concrete, money's committed. And I'm trying to figure out when that date is
Right.
now.
And we've already invested significant dollars in the planning.
But
Right.
all that's paperwork.
So I mean, Ralph, if you'd like to come up and speak in the mic and.
Yeah,
The sequence of construction,
yeah.
the first of all things is to make the site safe and get children in a safe place so we can maintain the head count and the ability to continue those services.
I think 15 years ago, I worked with Habitat with Humanity, and we remodeled some of those buildings that you're now going to have to
Yeah.
demolish, and they were questionable at the time. So
So-
I have no doubt what you're facing.
So even if we only took the back halves where we have the worst situation, there are toilet rooms in there, there are support facilities, it really doesn't make any sense. We can't continue operations in
Yeah.
the front part for so many reasons. But the more direct answer to your question is, we're gonna demolish these buildings anyway. So there are dollars associated with that. We have to have the remedial work, we have to have the environmental testing, all those sorts of things take place. But part of the plan right now is to go ahead and demolish those buildings. The next thing that we would do is to establish our infrastructure arrangements. So we could go back to the other one, but essentially we have a U-shaped building.
Yeah, you want to put that one, the drawing on that shows your
Yeah,
conceptual
that's-
plan? That's probably the easier one to visualize this.
Yep.
Yeah, is that?
Do you want me to-
Right, that, and just this piece right here is where your current parcel is, and this piece where all the parking is
No.
represents the
So
shared
it-
parking arrangement.
There's a little ear that's cut out.
The-
Right.
On the north.
Our parcel, we are putting parking on our parcel that we own, so this piece right here is part of our parcel.
But this piece, this slice here is the shared parking arrangement
Reciprocal
that you mentioned in the document. Okay.
So in terms of investment and what pins us to this site, you can kind of pick out that the building envelope itself is a U-shaped building. The way we're arranging it now is
Like this,
yes, like that.
and this is a courtyard out.
Those are all the gardens, outdoor pavilions, community spaces, playgrounds, all the things that are associated with the day-to-day operations. So our next task after demolition of these buildings would be to finish our permits, which has a, why do it for this one if we're not going to be at this site? So we're already held in abeyance if we're not going to go immediately out for our permits. So the first thing we would do is scrape half the site. So we would take where the buildings were, yes, we would scrape that half of the site.
Okay.
And we would put in all the infrastructure components because we're arranging it so that it can be, all the utilities can come into the common distribution locations on that half of the site. So that is where we would put hard dollars in that would have to be invested at that site. Now, the timeline, again, we're willing to go through the permit process because hopefully we can make arrangements to say, this is our configuration. It may not be here, but let's at least go through the preliminary third-party plan check, those sorts of things to try and short-circuit it. Should we be unable to come to a conclusion, we'll be in no worse position. If we are able to come to a conclusion on this, we'd identify the space and actually could begin construction elsewhere and maintain this operation while that's happening.
Let me ask one more question, and I'm gonna, I think, Suzanne, you and I talked about this 20 years ago or 10 years ago. I think this whole thing is slided up to the corner. Do you remember those conversations?
So if you don't mind, I'll
Yeah, that's fine.
jump on that.
You're a team, so,
stop me when you're sleepy. If you do that,
yeah.
this is just me speaking, my perceptions of living on this for a long time too. The road that gets taken away creates a problem for your other parcels. So the access road that goes to the charter school now and has the circulation patterns that allow the traffic to circulate there and come out through the road by the library, that would be gone.
Yeah.
So the fire district, I think, would have something to say about it because whatever the future might hold for the rest of the parcel, they're going to want two means of ingress and egress, again, depending on use. But if it goes to housing, different library, different kind of school, the traffic patterns and fire access and control through there would probably not like that road to be gone. And just an aside too, in terms of commercial real estate value in the future, that corner is one of your most attractive and valuable potential reuse points.
Ross, can you point up there just where that road is again, so the rest of the board members can see what Ralph's talking about?
So here's Main Gate Road coming in, this is the C Street, and there's a substandard, it's a paved road, but it isn't done to full city
okay,
standards.
that one.
It's a
Got it.
driveway kind of,
Yeah.
and it's right, comes down here, and then you pull into this area and you see, there's a fire hydrant down here, and over here is parking for the charter school, and then you turn around here and drive and you hit, the arrows are going the other way, but you hit basically the library facilities that have been built out, and then this takes you back out, and they have a little parking lot here, and this takes you back out to C Street.
Right.
So, and I think this is some trees along your back fence. I think you're pretty, you don't have windows facing that way.
Not now.
Not now. And this little, you own that piece and we own this piece, and so the road's out beyond your current property right now.
Yes.
Jim, did I describe, and here was courtyard, and their building was a U shape like this.
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Did that help? I mean,
Yeah, no, I just was interested in thoughts.
Okay. Trustee Aguila?
So my questions were about the MOU, but if you wanted to move along the conversation, and then when we get to the MOU part, I could ask the questions, or I can ask now.
Does anybody else have any construction timeline questions? Okay, then let's move on to Trustee Nell and then Trustee Mack.
As far as information available about your parcel, going back to the base closure agreements, do you have all that stuff? I mean,
we do.
Okay.
Trustee Mack?
They acquired the property the same time we do with it. 6 months.
Just logistical question. So I know that Trustee Miller asked this question, but I didn't quite hear the whole thing, so I didn't make sure I got it right. So basically, you're going to move 98 students out as soon as you can, roughly, into, and let's say, so as soon as those portables are on our little plot there, move them out as soon as you can, and then start construction by really effectively hitting those two buildings right away, just flattening them completely.
So, yes,
Okay.
but I'd like to explain a little bit more about that. The
Okay.
buildings need to be demolished no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So they're part of the phase that we're counting in with the temporary site. The actual construction of the redevelopment project is after that.
Okay, got it. So now here we are, we've got 98 students sitting in one portable, two portables?
There are 5 classrooms.
I'm thinking
But
buildings.
It's two 40 by 48 buildings.
Okay,
I can bring that up too.
that's okay, that's okay. I'm just taking stock in my head. Okay, so at that point, 98 students are occupying, and is that 100% occupancy of those two buildings, or are they kind of crammed in? Okay.
That's as many as we could fit in there and
That's what I
still
figured.
have playground.
Okay,
and-
just double checking. Okay. So now, then you say in the third building, at the end, part of those students will be moved off-site to another campus. Got that. The remainder of those students, how many were they?
There wouldn't be any students remaining. It's the administrative piece.
No,
So-
I thought there was like about half of the,
Can you come to the mic, Susan?
okay.
Sorry, I need everybody at home to hear.
I'm just trying to get all the logistics sorted out in my head.
No, the children that remain are in, can we switch back to the other, Yancy?
Yancy.
Can we?
Picture?
This one?
Yep. Yeah, right there. at
We
the
will
92.
not be relocating this building until we're ready to start our construction of the whole site. So there are, over here, we have our infant, toddler, and preschool classrooms, and then another preschool classroom facility that's coming in to house some of these children. That's going to be ordered at a later date.
Okay, that's where I'm going.
Yes, so that's why I wanted to pull up the other.
Got it. So we have 98 there, and now we're going to the third building, and at that point, another,
No, the third building is part of the 98. That's why I was trying to I wanted to pull up that other,
okay, so.
if you don't mind, I think it'll be easier.
It's going to
I'm trying to understand this. Maybe I'm being dense. Okay,
Temps.
because my understanding is when we put the 98 in there, we're maxed, and there's no room for more.
No. So,
There is. Okay.
so here's the plan, and this is the architect that put this together is working within what the licensing regulations are for indoor and outdoor space. So we couldn't. We have maximized
Sure.
which
It's a
is why
small
we have to move some of those kids over to another location.
Right.
So we have the immediate facilities that we would order once we have the MOU signed are these two classrooms, which are our infant and toddler classroom, and then the preschool classrooms right here, and that makes up what the operations in those two wings that we are going to be demolishing.
That's
Then up
98.
here, you have the site supervisor and staff lounge, all the support functions that are required for these services here. We have their playgrounds, and then we have the pad for the other preschool classroom in the building that we will be vacating once we're ready for construction.
So another temporary,
So, and
Will be
that
coming
makes
in at that
up the
point.
98 children. So this is a total of 98, no more that are
okay,
going
so
there.
initially, it's not 98.
No,
It's-
that's what I was trying to get at, is initially, it's just, okay, I don't have my, it's 40, you're gonna have, I'm sorry, is it 66? It's,
That's okay.
Felt it.
Now I understand. And so,
Okay.
okay, now let's go on the back end of all this. So now things are starting to get built. The two buildings that were knocked down are built. Are you gonna phase people out of this, or gonna just move them all out at once?
the best thing for us is to scrape, build, and move everybody back in when the entire program is built,
One project.
one project.
Right, but the way the timing is, it sounds like you're gonna get going on the first two wings first, and they could very well be up and ready before that third one, possibly.
Our intention now is to scrape and build. If we needed to phase it beyond that, we would put all the infrastructure in and the foundations, and then we would build the shell of the areas that we need immediately, and then add on, build out the shells for the rest of it.
Okay, so when you say
That's a
scrape and,
fallback.
when you say scrape and build, though, you're not gonna be scraping everything right out the gate. You're gonna be scraping the first two, right?
We'll be scraping to the building that Susan pointed out.
Right.
And the other one until those children are out. So they'll have the time of their lives for 3 or 4 weeks while they watch the big machines work on the outside,
I
coming
get that,
towards
okay.
them. You know, oh my goodness, the bulldozer's coming
So
right at us.
that to me speaks phasing out and phasing back in. That's where I'm going. Okay. I'm just trying to get an understanding of the timing. And then in terms of, if you were to give me just start to end, how long this is all gonna take? What do you think?
After the permits are issued, we have 273 days, give or
78
take.
last time.
270.
Got it, but
Look, that's what happens in construction. But it got
But-
better, not worse.
but
273,
you say after the
278.
permits are issued, that's where I'm going. So let's say this got approved tonight and you can get going. Give me a rough, quarter of the year you think you guys would be out by.
Well, we would probably not get our permits issued from the city until February.
Okay. So then kind of do a year there. So roughly quarter Q1 of 2020. Okay. That's,
Once we go, we go. I mean,
sure.
that's where.
Time is money.
We're very happy to have as part of our supporters,
0.7 through.
a large excavation contractor.
Local, large excavation country.
Starts with a G.
Can't say.
Yeah, well, there's three of those, unfortunately. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sorry, we're going to go back to trustee Aguila. You had some questions regarding the MOU?
Right. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about accountability and responsibility. And on the MOU number 4, I'm going to read it. It says, the NUSD grants the use of its property without contribution of any costs, fees, or expenses of any kind or character on the part of the NUSD. The NUSD makes no representation or warranty as to the condition of the property and its suitability for the purposes of the NBCC. The condition of the property, meaning, the ground, the soil, or what's above it, or what will be above it. So I just wanted to hear from you guys if, verbally, I just want to hear verbally that you agree with this.
We have no recommendation to change that language from our side.
Okay?
So if the
And-
MOU is approved, that language would be included.
Okay, great. So let's move to letter E, and this is our responsibility. As far as North Bay responsibility would be letter E. The NBCC will install independently utility meters if needed to specifically track all utility usage of its temporary facilities to ensure separation of the NUSD and the NBCC utility charges. Separation, I just wanted explanation about, can you tell us what that will look like?
That's a separate meters, so that you will have no utilities pass through any meter, that you're responsible for the costs that go through that meter, so.
So NUSD would be, so can you explain about that? Because I'm still not clear, because it sounds like North Bay would be responsible for.
Yes, North Bay would be responsible for all utility costs, including the installation of those utilities and any use charges during that point, to which Ralph noted that they will put separate meters on those utilities to ensure that they are billed directly, and those charges do not come to the district.
Okay, and do you agree? Okay. Number F, I just wanted to know how. So it says, The NBCC will work closely with the Novato Charter School to identify and properly address all safety concerns and impacts with the traffic flow, parking, and emergency services access, assess a cost by the construction and the use of its temporary facilities. So how would you plan to work with the charter school to make sure that that everything will be safe?
So we've already held joint meetings with the charter school where to bring up any potential issue as and they've held, I believe, separate meetings with the charter school, and we also have our own traffic in case there are any concerns by the charter. But as of right now, they have noted no significant concerns with this project.
Okay, Yancy, thank you, but the question was actually for them, and if you can tell us your answer.
This is a coordination clause, so it essentially says that we will do things in an open and transparent manner and include all of the stakeholders around us in decisions about traffic, phasing, and those sorts of things, so no one gets surprised. That's a different way to say this, is that we agree to be forthright and in advance of problems, try and solve them all through coordination.
Because there's no representation here tonight from the charter school, but just wanted to let you guys know, and you already know this, but I wanted to remind you that this board is very supportive of the charter school. And we also support you guys, but we want to make sure that that we have a good partnership and that the safety of the kids would be first.
Yes, and we have had conversations with the charter school, and a letter of support of our project on the temporary site did come to the district.
And according to the MOU, you guys would be responsible for any of that. So I just wanted to, again, ask you, do you agree?
Well, we have to
We
talk
haven't
about
signed it yet.
responsible in a different way.
Um,
We're
that-
not responsible for restriping or changing the traffic patterns or anything that would come up with the charter school.
Okay.
So we would be responsible to coordinate all the activities in accordance with code and the phasing of construction with all the stakeholders around it.
But according to the language here, it says that NBCC will work closely with the Novato Charter School to identify and properly address all safety concerns and impacts with the
Right.
traffic, the flow, the parking, and emergency services access caused by the construction and use of its temporary facilities. Agreed?
There's nothing in here about cost for that. But if there's striping that's required, it'll come on our side because it'll be a code compliant activity. So when costs are identified, they're likely to come to us. This clause doesn't talk about cost. It only talks about coordination.
Right, I didn't say cost. I said cost. Sorry, I said cost. Access cost by the construction.
Sorry.
Yeah, so you agree with F?
Yeah, we agree
Thank
with what
you.
it says.
Okay, so trustee Mack and then trustee Milrick?
Just a quick question, if you could stay, or back to F. I'd like to suggest just adding 2 words. In the second line, address all safety concerns and impacts with, and before traffic flow, I would like to insert the words operations and traffic flow. I'd like to have an assurance that there's no impact on their operations from this. Not just traffic flow and safety, but their operations, because that field is very important to them. And last thing I want to see is a backhoe sitting on there for a few hours and they can't do something or something like that. That's all I'm saying.
Our interests are aligned. We are in agreement.
Okay, so maybe, can we just add the words operations and?
Yeah, I would
between
like
with
to,
traffic flow.
just in, that being a
We can get to that
negotiation
there.
point,
Yeah,
I want to be,
That's
Yeah.
where I want to go.
perfect.
Okay. Trustee Milrick?
I just want to be clear about where we stand as a board on this issue. We have a duty to the charter school. We have a relationship with the North Bay Children's Center. While it's important for those 2 organizations to work together, it's critical that their relationships are directly with the Novato School District not with each other. We want to stay in the middle of this relationship because over the last 20 years, it's worked well because Yancey or his staff or the superintendent have sat at meetings to make sure that differences are resolved because the legal relationships are to us, not to each other. And I would like to have us understand that we will continue that structure. It's worked in the past. And put that, and Yancey, is that a fair statement? And is that, would you like?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I think we take
We're serving the same
very
folks.
seriously our responsibility as the property owner of the parcel that the charter school sits on, and our relationship, our direct relationship with the charter school and our partnerships with NBCC, that we are a key player in that, and we hold that responsibility very in a very high level.
If we see a backhoe on their ball field, I want the call to go to you first.
It's our
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, it's our property, exactly. It's our property. Yeah,
Not let it
exactly.
happen. That's,
Yeah, well, that's,
yeah.
yeah. that
Yeah,
would-
there you go, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Things
and,
happen, I get it, yeah. Let's prevent it.
I don't want anybody to think that we're gonna be able to get out of being in the middle of this. It works because Yancey's done the hard work over decades to him or his predecessors.
okay, so trustee Mack?
Thanks.
One last question, I apologize. Can we pull up the slide with the future plan on it? With the end plan? Just, and this, when you said striping, it came to mind. So, obviously, gonna restripe the areas adjacent to your property, but there's a whole lot of parking out there. Is that whole thing gonna get restriped? Or does it need to, or does it not need to be restriped once you're done?
It does not need to be restriped because it was recently repaved,
Into the mic, please.
striped.
Got it, but I'm just saying, is that gonna be, is that gonna work with the future plan? Is the layout gonna work?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was worried about. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Superintendent, any questions? Okay, all right. Yancey, any questions? Okay. Just making sure everybody's got it. You actually asked 3 of my questions, so I'm good. All right, so the board will recess into closed session, and when we come back out, trustee Cooper will give a report. Thank you. move on. So, do we have any comments? Okay,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the MOU with the change I mentioned earlier. Section 5F, the
5F.
second line, the impacts between the words with and traffic, insert the words operations and, so that it says, address all safety concerns and impacts with operations and traffic flow.
I will second the motion as amended.
okay, and all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, six and one. Is that absent or abstained, I guess? Recused? Okay, recused. Okay. All right, and that will conclude our meeting. Thank you.